May I start by thanking all of you for coming to this panel session. It is not a very long session. Each panel member has been allocated about 11 minutes to make a presentation on what's happening to CA from a public policy promotional point of view in their continents, and then we will have an open discussion before we finish. I am supposed to be a moderator, and I will try and do so, but I think the panel members are adult enough to moderate themselves. I've been asked to introduce my presentation first, and it is not really on any particular continent. My presentation is on an interim update of where CA has got to at the moment. The updating has not been finished, and it will be finished in the next 2-3 months, but it has we have captured pretty much about 95% of the area of CA globally. The sources of information which we've been using over the last 10 years range from official statistics from ministry like Canada, America, no-till associations from different parts of the world like Australia, thanks to Bill Crabtree, and Africa, Europe, no-till associations at the national level and the regional level. They, of course, keep an eye on how CA area is moving forward, and also then individual institutions, especially research institutions, ministries of agriculture, NGOs, and a lot of people who actually are the champions. They do know a lot about what's happening to CA in their country, like, for example, in Iran or India or so forth. So I'll give you a quick rundown of what's happening to CA at the moment. But just before I do so, just let's remind ourselves what are the drivers of CA globally, and what have they been in the past, and we'll look at the global spread and finish off with what are the kinds of benefits which are being mobilized with CA in broad terms, in general terms. The drivers of CA have ranged initially from erosion and degradation, especially in North America and other places like Brazil, Argentina, China, followed by other drivers such as drought and cost of production. These have, in the early years, were the primary drivers, and they still are, and these are not mutually exclusive drivers. Soil degradation continues to be the biggest threat arising from our conventional tillage, high disturbance tillage agriculture, and that disturbance can be high even with a hoe. It doesn't have to be a big plow. A hoe can equally disturb the soil, totally pulverize it. But in recent years, especially in the last 10 years, we have been hearing the word ecosystem services. When land is degraded by conventional agriculture, we also destroy or debilitate soil-mediated ecosystem services like clean water, carbon sequestration, and so forth. And these ecosystem services are beginning to be recognized as part of the value chain, and farmers are beginning to be remunerated for them. Climate change has become a real driver as well for CA, and lately, especially since 2005, sustainable intensification, we keep hearing about it more and more. And in other places, such as developing countries and regions, pro-poor strategies are also now realizing that CA can work with a low resource situation, and it can work with very small farmers as well. But generally, all these drivers are now working in different places in different combinations, but generally we find that promotion spread is still being led by, and it is logical, led very much by farmers themselves, coming together and championing their cause and innovating and moving forward. And that will remain so, and if it doesn't, we must protect it to make sure that the farmers are basically leading the whole show. But it does require policy and institutional support, and I think we'll hear from our panel members how that is being organized, and especially for smallholder farmers, they do need support. This is the curve of CA uptake globally. It now stands at about 180 million hectares. This 2015-2016, and there's a very rich history of how it was started, where, by whom, and so forth. And there, in fact, in Brazil, we have the first pioneer sitting here, Mr. Herbert Bartz, who was the pioneer farmer in Brazil, who showed that it was possible. But you can see that since 1990. CA really has took off globally, and it is now taking off at different sort of rates in different continents. But globally, since 2008, 2009, it has been moving forward at the annual rate of 10 million hectares per year. 10 million hectares, not a small area. The whole of Portugal is about 10 million hectares. So every year we are finding that 10 million hectares of conventionally tilled agriculture land is being brought into CA. The no-till area on its own, no-till is further ahead. That's the leading edge. But by the time it becomes CA and meets minimum criteria, when we can call it broadly CA on the CA track, it's about 180. By the time we finish the update, for example, we're still waiting for figures from India, for example. India is now moving rapidly forward. Russia has moved forward quite a lot. So we reckon that we probably will end up somewhere between 185 or so. But that is the figure at the moment globally. I will show you what they look like regionally. Overall, half the area is in the developing regions, and half is in the industrialized region. So North America, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe is around 50%, and the rest of the regions are about 50%. So there's no sort of northern region, the global north, driving this. It's everybody is responding to these global challenges and concerns. But what I would like you to notice, is that since sorry, here, this, okay. These are the allocations of in terms of area for different region, like South America has got 69.9 million hectares. It was 49 million hectares in 2008. So these are the figures in 2008, and these are the figures now. And you can see now that the percentage change is given here. In those 8 years, Latin America has moved forward by about 41%, North America 51%, Australia, a big jump forward. They really are making it 86%. But now look at these countries, these regions like Asia. Asia has moved forward by over 400%. And China, for example, CA area is about 9.2 million hectares. India has no-till wheat, over about 5 to 6 million hectares, but now they're bringing in the rice crop as well into a sort of what they call double no-till system, and they have got already over 1.5 million hectares, and I think that there will be a lot more. So Asia has moved forward here. Kazakhstan is now 2.5 million hectares. Pakistan is reporting 600,000 hectares. But look at Africa. We hear stories about it's not suitable for Africa, but Africa is now close to 3 million hectares, and the change has been almost fivefold, but certainly more than fourfold increase. And that means that more than 1 million smallholder farmers have taken up CA in Africa. And of course, you will hear more from Sadie on Africa, and of course, Dr. Paroda on Asia as well. And Europe as well. I've not captured fully all the area here, but Europe has increased the area by 56%, but side by side with annual cropland, there is perennial systems coming into CA. And in Europe, for example, a lot of perennial systems in some of the Mediterranean countries are being moved into CA. And Spain is a very good example. More than 30% of olive orchards are now under CA. Globally, we have 12.5% of the annual cropping or cropland under CA. And it is moving, as I said, at the rate of 10 million hectares. And this is the global spread. It covers small farms, smallholders, large farms, tropical areas, subtropical areas, and of course, winter rainfall areas as well, and all the way into temperate regions and continental temperate as well. So it's just about all the ecologies where land-based agriculture is practiced. You will now begin to find CA. I can run down what is happening in different regions, but I won't. Many countries now are reporting. These are the countries reporting, for example, in Asia. The new countries are Iran, Turkey, even Central Asia countries like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. They're all coming on board. Azerbaijan as well, they are here. But in Southeast Asia, we've now got CA being reported in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and so forth. In Africa, we have a lot of countries, about 20 countries now reporting CA. And of course, there you will find large farms and small farms. Some of the larger farms have been practicing CA for the last 25, 30 years in Africa, but now the focus is on smallholder, and I think we'll hear more about it from Sadie. And I think that's about all. And publications are now coming through from on all the systems from different parts of the world, and these are just examples. Lastly, the pattern of benefit. Now we are dealing with biological systems here, so we cannot get one response in every place. Every field is different, and levels of degradations from which they might be recovering are different. But we do see a pattern of benefit coming out in terms of increased yields, stable yields, increased productivity and efficiency and resilience, less fertilizers being used over time. Generally, farmers after 10 years report 50% less fertilizer. In terms of small-scale farming in Africa, in Asia, I have been working with many farmers who have no access to mineral fertilizer, and we can do it quite well, and less pesticide. But broadly speaking, energy savings are enormous, labor savings are enormous, and then benefit related to land. We can have greater livestock carrying capacity and, in fact, human carrying capacity, lower impact of climate, and environmental costs as well. But this last thing is very important, the rehabilitation of abandoned and degraded land, which has been with us in a major way. 500 million hectares of land have been abandoned globally since the Second World War, and many of the continents carry quite a lot of potentially good agricultural land, but which are now lying wasteland. And CA is a system which can rehabilitate these then. And ecosystem services, there are very good large-scale ecosystem services program now operating. I'll just show you two. One is in Canada, which is carbon offset scheme. Tom may talk about it. The farmers are being paid for carbon sequestration. And of course, one other major example is in the Paraná Basin 3 in Brazil, water quality has improved enormously over the last 20 years simply because the Parana Basin has been put under good quality CA. It was like this, the water 25 years ago, and today we have this water flowing into Aitapu Dam. Thank you very much, and we will now listen to continental presentations, and I would like to invite Dr. Paroda to give his presentation.
Make it full screen. Full screen.
Full screen. ¿Quieres saber cómo?
Okay. Thank you very much. Indeed, it's a matter of great pleasure to be here, and thanks to Pedro and Beatriz for the invitation to share some of the experiences in this panel discussion with regard to what has happened on conservation agriculture in Asia and the Pacific region. Much has been said by Amir in relation to the global scenario, and we have to learn a great deal as far as moving forward with conservation agriculture. And I would like to bring the context of our region in particular vis-a-vis the rest of the world, that Asia-Pacific is agriculturally a very vibrant region and is a major supplier of food, even at the global level, and sustains 60% of the population from just 1/3 of the geographical land. And it produces 90% of the global rice, 40% of the cereals, and 40% of the animal products. And it is 80% consumer of the aquaculture market, and around 80% farmers are smallholder farmers. So unlike in other parts of the world, our situation is much, much different, that if you have to promote conservation agriculture, you have to keep in focus the requirement of these smallholder farmers who have less than 2 hectares of land and would require a different kind of machinery and the technologies. And in that respect, this region also witnessed green, white, and blue revolutions, led to food security to many of the people who were otherwise starving for food. And this revolution was innovation-led around the dwarfing genes, photo and thermo insensitive genes, which were incorporated in wheat and rice varieties, leading to high intensity of cropping, and therefore increasing the production of food grains to a greater extent. However, over the last 5 decades of Green Revolution, we have started recognizing second-generation problems. And these are factor productivity decline because of intensification of cropping system, harnessing most of the natural resources, whether it is the soil or water, or for that matter, even use of the nutrients which have become imbalanced, and the organic matter content, which used to be in the endogenetic plane, which we call as food bowl, used to be around 2%, has come down over last 5 decades to less than 0.5%. You can very well imagine with this kind of scenario of soil health, which is not likely to be sustainable for longer period, something will have to be done in the context of organic recycling, which otherwise is not in practice. Water table has gone down, and there are other problems. And when we see, and what Amir had said, Now, we understand it is 180 because the revision of these figures is taking place. But what is available with us before is around 150, or even if we take 180, Asia is much, much behind. And we have, in fact, missed the opportunity of using this approach to a greater extent to move forward and provide farmers the technologies in which they can save resources and increase their production as well as income, which is possible through technologies such as conservation agriculture. China has moved better. Kazakhstan is moving in Central Asia. India started, I will tell about it later, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, Uzbekistan, about which Amir had already indicated. So it is hardly 10% area still compared to the rest of the world. We need to accelerate this, and we need to move much faster, but that would require the kind of policy support that we had for Green Revolution. The full policy support for best infrastructure, whether it is the canals or the dams or the fertilizer factories or seed corporations, and then the best technologies and partnership with CG system like IRI or CEMET, and then the most innovative farmers to adopt these technologies. So you need the same kind of effort now if we have to move forward. We started in 1990, the first program on conservation agriculture involving 4 countries in South Asia: Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. And this was the first eco-regional program in the CG system, which got even King Baudouin Award and is considered to be a great success story. Based on this, in fact, we learned a lot. The first thing was that you have to work with farmers, and you have to work off the fields from the research institutions along with the farmers' fields, without which you just cannot really do the NRM research, the natural resource management. You cannot simulate those conditions of farmers on the research farm. And the second point is that you have to have technologies which are more acceptable to the farmers, and therefore you have to bring in more entrepreneurship at the rural level and at a smaller level, not big tractors which you are using here and going in for, because you definitely need this. We had labor in the past, but now the labor is costly, and intensive agriculture is now forcing us to look for opportunities by which you can save on, whether it is the energy, whether it is water, and whether it is fuel. In that respect, we learned a lot. We have now areas where conservation agriculture is practiced quite commonly, and even the intensification has gone to more than 250% for cropping, which means rice, wheat, and then after wheat, also legume. Then you can make it sustainable. It's not like here, soybean followed by next year, not same year, next year with either corn or wheat and so on. So you have the pressure on land, you have the pressure of people, and you have to therefore look for technologies which are more intensified relating to conservation agriculture. What happened when we started this rice wheat production system? The major problem emerged was what to do of rice straw to plant wheat immediately after wheat harvesting. And farmers thought, to save time, better burn this rice straw and go for cultivation and then go for wheat planting. And what you see, these red spots, is the satellite imageries over the last just 1 decade. That large area, even almost in Punjab and Haryana, which is the green revolution belt, almost more than 30 to 40 million ton of rice straw is burnt annually, leading to pollution problems. And this created an opportunity for us to convince the policymakers, because policymakers would otherwise not understand the importance of conservation agriculture. So they started talking about what can be done, and the technology like Happy Seeder, which can help us in having the entire rice straw tilled in the soil and organic recycling through that process and not burning could be of great help. But you do need such kind of machinery. You do need the farmers to be convinced, and then only this possibility is there. There are initiatives by various countries. I don't want to go into the details, but China is moving very fast. India is now moving, and we want to revive. Thanks to ACIR support, that in again this rice wheat consortium that we had in 4 countries, we hope that it is further revived, because you do need a platform for knowledge sharing and for learning from each other's successes. Innovation. Even innovation of this kind, I mean, both the scientists who are working on it are present in this audience and would be making the presentations. It is on subsurface drip irrigation. No one ever could think of that rice could be grown with subsurface drip irrigation. Earlier, no agronomist agreed in our system that you can grow after rice wheat without cultivating the land. The agronomist would never accept this. So we have to learn from each other, and there are various new options which are emerging, and these technologies are going to be of great help in future. Then cotton wheat is another major cropping system, and in Central Asia also it is being followed, and also in India. Now through the high clearance tractors, you could go in for cultivating wheat in the standing cotton crop by using this kind of machinery, which otherwise was not a possibility. There is innovation, also with regard to leisure land leveling, which is helping in reducing use of water to the extent of about 30%. And this is catching up like anything in the recent past. What you need is to have the varieties which are suitable for conservation agriculture. We have not bred them for this purpose, and therefore agrobiodiversity has to be looked in from the angle of those materials which are having heat tolerance for the terminal heat or are tolerant to high temperatures when the wheat planting is done. So you need to look for this kind of variability. We had first International Congress on Agrobiodiversity, and the message was that you must look into genotype, into environment, into management if you have to go in for the varieties which are suitable for conservation agriculture. All varieties would not suit. We also wanted to understand what is happening in the region. So a regional network and partnership initiative was taken through a regional conference organized, and the message is that you have to have a common platform, you have to outscale innovations which are already available, you have to have regional partnership, and you must go in for policy reforms. The other point is that for doing this, you need youth in agriculture. You cannot expect the old traditional farmers to change their mindset. We need the youth, women, to be trained and to bring in so that they are entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs for machinery, entrepreneur for technology transfer, entrepreneur for also input providers, and knowledge which is very critical to be given to the farmer without any dissemination loss. So that role has to be understood and taken care of. What happened? It is stuck now. Next one. And the policy advocacy. You need to bring in the policy makers, and they must be shown and convinced in terms of like Happy Cedar. The Chief Minister of Haryana State was not otherwise convinced about Happy Cedar, but when there was problem of pollution, they took a decision that burning will be banned and Happy Cedar to be used, and 50% subsidy on use of Happy Cedar will be provided by the government. Then possibly these kinds of technologies can pick up. So you need policy advocacy, which is very, very critical. And finally, what is the roadmap for conservation agriculture in Asia? We require to establish long-term basic and strategic research platforms, which is the need of the hour, and where we need partnership with research institutions abroad, and particularly from Latin American countries, Brazil and Argentina, bridging the knowledge gap by sharing success stories within the region, which otherwise is very, very important, so that you don't do the same mistake. And strengthen extension system through farmers' participatory approach. Once he is convinced, he will adopt them. Mainstream CA with sustainable development goals. Now, this is very, very important. And also for climate smart agriculture. There will be presentations later. Promote public-private partnership, and public-private partnership of young entrepreneurs who can multiply these prototypes and make available without any quality loss in terms of those particular machineries that are to be provided, and enabling policies and doubling resources for agriculture research, which was the outcome of global conference that we organized in Uruguay in 2012, when this was very clearly reflected that all nations have to reorient their research agenda to address the concerns of farming systems and smallholder farmers. If we don't do that, I think we are not serving the farming community, and scientists are working in their own silos. So you need to have the proper reorientation, and also you have to have proper policies, and definitely you would require more resources. And it was clearly understood that we need to not only double but triple the support for agriculture research for development. Thank you very much.
I've pressed? Okay, working. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for, I must first thank Kassam and Aapresid to have invited me to represent on behalf of the French Farmers Conservation Agriculture Association to share about our experience and in public policies and in relation with society. And I'll try to share what we know and speak about our experience first, and perhaps after that, if we have time, but probably not, we could have more different considerations. So, okay, I go. So I explain what is APAD. APAD is means, in fact, Association for Sustainable Agriculture. It's 450 farmers now in all territories of France, different crop production systems. We focus only on annual crops and animals, animal farms. We don't care about perennial crops. We don't count it because we see no real challenge on that. In fact, it's nice to know that 7 years ago we were 3 persons, and it's a rapid growth. Despite we use strict application of zero tillage. Zero means zero, it's not a little. And we use cover crops and we use rotation as far as we can. So it's really the strict definition. And despite of that, we have grown. And perhaps because of that, we'll see. Our missions, of course, is to help farmers to do technical. We also do field days, etc., technical job, as everyone does. But I don't mention that because it's not the topic of today. Today, we've got focus on civil society and policies. But we have two kind of missions. First is about civil society serving, understanding what civil society needs from farmers and bring the farmers' voice there. And also, of course, we focus on farmers' needs to make technical, to serve them, to help them improve their operations. And both are needed, because if we want to speak with civil society with success, we must have good farmers, good results. As far as we've got poor results, we are bad advocates. So we have made interesting exercise 1.5 years ago. It's about surveying all our farmers. They are all in fact, it's 10 groups, local groups, about what are their concerns about agriculture and also about conservation agriculture. Of course, there are, on the left you see obstacles. There are economic, sociological, agronomic, regulatory, and communication. They are the last on the list, but at the end, they are the beginning for farmers' groups. Because as far as they've got no recognition from society, from their regional environment, from policymakers locally, they have no support and no capacity to have support. Because if you want to improve your technical operation, you need to have employees, for example, to make experiments. And this is not possible to get somebody and to pay if you have no reputation. So as organizations, you must be strong. That's why, as levels, as action, we must first, the first priority is to get recognition of CA. That's where the definition is very important. Because in France and in Europe, everybody is speaking about conservation agriculture, plenty of people, but it's a whole mess. They use from minimum to no cover crops and plenty of things which are very average and don't bring the results. And it's about specific regulatory arrangements for CA. But first, we ask policymakers, please don't put regulations are blocking farmers. First, before enabling regulations, we need to have freedom for farmers to experiment and do what they need to do. And after that, we can dream of other things. Okay, but to accelerate, I review the national actions we do to obtain that. It was entering into the steering committee of the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Le Foll, who did a program about agroecology, which was including conservation agriculture, because he knows very well what we are doing. But it's also about agroforestry, organic is inside. It's a typical, because agroecology is a political term which doesn't say exactly what it is, so everybody can be happy. But we were inside. And that's a significant improvement for us. And we entered into a group of work with the officers of the ministry, which is very important because the minister is just temporary, where the officers, the public officers, they stay, and they are still there. And we had a specific groups about criteria for CA, for conservation agriculture. And that's where we could win to impose, or at least to explain why the criteria, the strict criteria with zero tillage and cover crops and rotation are very important and avoid this mix and that. And it was a significant progress. It's historical because now we've got in the ministry, in France, people who understand what it is. At least we can start with a sound dialogue. And after that, we can go to specific plans, etc. And one of them, and reason why I come back to that. Okay, on the right here, what we did with our work with the farmers about the needs and why, we have documented this and put a report. And when we came to the officers with a report, with something documenting what are the farmers' needs and why, we had some success. And with this is our capital now. It means that we have become a real contributor with the officers of the ministry to be able to have a quality dialogue. Otherwise, the other bodies, the other organizations, they come with a number, but we don't have the number. In fact, we represent 450, means that we are 1 per 1,000 of the total French farmers. And in fact, conservation agriculture close to no-till is average 2-3%, not more. Quality one. Huh? in France. And in Europe, it's more or less the same. Huh? So it means it's small. So we cannot count on the number. We must count on the quality of what we do. And this way, okay, and this was an official event, the Nights of Agroecology, different in spring. And this is in the garden of the Ministry of Agriculture. And you see the little guy close to Mr. Le Foll. The tall one is Mr. Le Foll, our minister, was minister, and the other one is our ex-president. And the other ones are farmers of APAD and the director of APAD, etc. So, and this is very interesting because of that, it looks funny, but we attract attention of everybody now. We are very important, all the farmers, including some companies and blah, blah. Okay, we also went in the Paris International Fair of Agriculture, which is an event for public. It's not really for farmers, but it's for public, for farmers to show what they do. And there, we have also a visit of the president, he was in campaign. It was the time of the campaign for the election. But despite of that, he didn't want to be anymore and couldn't. But we had some people there, important. And also, on the right, we've got an important person of the ministry. And, okay, all of these are happy to see what farmers say. We also entered into making some advocacy at European level. And the first significant was a workshop in June last year with the European Commission. The director of the head of the DG Agri, of the General Direction of Agriculture, he organized for us, also for at European level, which means that we were not only APAD, but also other farmers. And also Gottlieb was from president of ECAF was there, and to deliver what farmers need. It was not more about the benefits of conservation agriculture, because they know. It's about how can we implement and disseminate. And this is part of the difficulties they have, usually is to mobilize farmers, because farmers, they are fed up with regulations and politicians. They don't move anymore. And so how can we mobilize? And we can, and we are unique in that. After that, we had different conferences, and we always have constructive context, but with the officers, not really with the politicians. Must take care. It's not the parliament. Huh? It's the commission, the people in commission, who are in charge of the dossier, including environment. And, okay, and this was in December, the Great Agricultural Outlook Conference was 600 persons. Everybody was there, and all the general directorates were there. All the heads were there. And after, we had Sarah, and Sarah is over there. She's our vice president, a farmer, and she made a speech. In fact, there were only, in the full day, only 2 farmers were speakers, as usually in these conferences. Huh? There are plenty of conferences about agriculture all around the world. There are only few farmers talking. Huh? Usually plenty of specialists and experts, but few farmers. There were 2 of them, and one of them was Sarah. And after the conference, they were also convinced and happy. They were all running after her to give her their business card. And, hey, okay, come back. And it's very interesting. So, and we also did some more international about, in fact, we had the launch of the Global Conservation Agriculture Network in December 15 in the COP21 in Paris, the climate conference. And we had different working sessions. In Morocco, first in France for the climate conference, and after that in the climate conference, the COP22 in Morocco, and okay, and we'll go on that. So, what is GCAN here? It's in fact a groupment of most of the important no-till or conservation agriculture farmers-led association around the world who decided to group and who have signed up for manifesto for climate and food security, and signed up and decided to perhaps coordinate our operations. For example, how to make it that between 2 congresses, 3 years, in fact, what do we do between the congresses? Okay, how can we operate together to deal with the global issues like communications, reputations, NGOs, and all the stuff? Okay, and this is, for example, what we did during the COP21 in Paris. We make exhibits. We had plenty of people you can recognize on the pictures. Many of them are here around the table and in the room. I must avoid to call somebody because I will forget. Huh? But everybody is playing the game, and it's giving success to that. And visibility, which is key important. The key importance. We had some media coverage in French newspapers and also elsewhere. I think there were things in The Guardian and things like that, and it's very important to be visible. In the world of today, communication is a key. This is COP22 in Marrakesh. And what is significant, on the right top, you see Aziz El Abidine. This guy, 6 months before, he was more or less alone, and 6 months later, he's somebody having a Morocco Association for Conservation Agriculture. They've got the support of their government, and they are very active, have good scientists also helping them. It's a miracle. And they want also to network with us, and they are part of the GCAN also. And on the top left, you see that 4 per thousand, the thousand means 4 per thousand, it's a global program made internationally, launched by Le Foll, and about carbon sequestration. I'll see later on that. And in fact, we were happy enough that Tom Goddard could speak for GCAN there in this conference also. So, and 4 per thousand here, for the people who are curious, it's an initiative about food security and climate through improving the soil through carbon sequestration. And carbon, it's about putting carbon in the soil. Huh? It's easy to understand for you, but for many people outside, they don't know. On the right, it was a small meeting organized in Paris by the head of, and the secretary of, who is a French person of the Ministry of Agriculture. And on the top, you see the third from the left is Mr. Ibrahim Mayaki, who is the Chief Executive Officer of NEPAD, the new partnership for African Union. And he's very nice and likes what we to meet farmers, and we were there to serve that purpose. And we spoke, of course, about the international network of farmers that what we are forming. So, and there it was in Montpellier, end of June, a big meeting of the parties of the consortium of the 4 per thousand, where we were there also. We did a poster here for GCAN, and also we had, this is interacting during the Congress with the different people you can recognize. We've got Pilou, and also, I don't remember the name of a person, or important person in the Ministry of Agriculture from Argentina. And okay, this is what happens there. And it's very important, very efficient when you can talk directly to people. Le Foll is no more minister, but he's still member of French Parliament, and he's still vice president of the 4 per thousand. Okay, so now just to finish, the question about citizen and agriculture, what can we capture with that? Because this was success, of course, but it's still small compared to the challenges we have. We still have many oppositions, especially in France, in Europe at political level. There are other bodies, competitors, people who don't have the same vision as farmers, and perhaps as the one we have, including in the farming communities, are very conservative people, others. So how can we do? And the success story we have from that, if we extract the principles, is that the first is that what is working is when farmers talk from what they know and what they give, what they say, because it's reality. What is important, what works every time, is when we bring people, citizens, to the farms. But when we cannot, we can replace this perhaps by video or testimonies. It works, because nobody dares to say to a farmer that he's a liar. But when you are expert, they tell you that. They can challenge me because I am an agronomist, but they cannot challenge a farmer when he says, I see that, and I need that. This is his legitimacy. But, of course, we need new mindset and new ways to think. And the new advocacy method we must start, and we are starting, is based on capacity of farmers to exchange positively with civil society and politicians, and share common field experiences. Because when the citizens share the same experience, the same farming, the same field experience about the cover crops, about the flowers, about the good soil, the smell of the soil, the earthworms, and all the biodiversity, they are exciting. They say, okay, this is what we want. Because they see and they see. It's about feeling. It's not about, what a scientific report of that. This is for bureaucrats, not for people vote and think with their brain and with their feeling, with their heart. And that's what farmers are able to bring. And that's why we must also disseminate all of this knowledge to our groups. And the growth after that is supported by technical success and progress. So we can disseminate more groups because they've got success and they are better advocates. And then we can accelerate the movement. It's iterative. But the key is on the lowest part. All farmers' associations, we need to increase, and they need to increase their professional capacity in all domains. Capacity means also strategy, people management. It means organizational capacity, project management, fundraising, discussing with partners, all of this. When they are professional, they can do it well. And there, last is just the last one, we can see perhaps a role for GCAN, because all of this needs to be consistent at global level. When you say in history about conservation agriculture in Australia, another one in Argentina, another one in China, a different one in France and in Germany or whatever, everybody is lost because communication now is global. And NGOs, they know how to do it. They are very efficient. We must be efficient too. That's why we need some coordination. Of course, not dictate everything, but at least share principles. And that's where the role of experts there is to bring methods to farmers to improve the way we do. And that's something to do. And the role here, clear point, we must take care of governance. Farmers' proposals and the farmers' needs are the drivers for them. The role of others is to help them. Okay, and this is the last. 1 month ago, with one of our friends, Alfred Gessler, we came to Rolf Derbch in Germany, who is recovering today from a surgery. But he gave at that time same messages that years ago in a General Assembly of our federation in Germany. We have got key items for success. We must get champions farmers in each country. After that, we must be strict on CA principles. We must not cheat or try to be inclusive with plenty of other things. We must be strict. And we can bring the results then to policymakers. But directly, we must bypass every organization. Farmers are spokesmen, but experts are needed to support. Everyone has a role, but it's not similar role. Farmers cannot speak for scientists, and scientists cannot speak for farmers. And after that, it's important to operate a global, consistent network to be together and share the same thing globally. That's why we're here. And congresses are for that. We need to exchange together and be better. Okay, thank you. No. It was long.
Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you.
You are next.
Okay.
Thank you, Amir. Good afternoon, CA enthusiasts, and welcome. I'd like to thank Kapaz and the local organizing committee of Aapresid for the invitation to come and speak to you today. I am going to be taking a little different tact. I'm going to be looking at CA through the policy lens and discuss policy at a North American level, a national level, and down to farm levels. And hopefully you'll see that you will have a role of influencing policy and more than just one point. We need many points of contact to make changes. I've titled this North American policy. My apologies to Mexico. I've not included Mexico in this policy scan. I'm aware of some of the things in Mexico, but at the risk of getting things wrong, I'm just not including them right now. So now, in both Canada and the United States, we have 5-year program plans for agriculture. In Canada, the provinces have a lot of control over how they program agriculture and deliver agriculture and natural resource responsibilities also at the provincial level. Excuse me. The U.S. is more of a federal system and controlled from the federal offices and distributed through the USDA system in the U.S. Lately, in what we have in Canada that again CA can link into is a treaty between the two countries on the Great Lakes, the lakes that go between our countries, and we share the waters and that. There's lots of concerns there about water quality, and there are programs there for nutrient management on farms. Ties in very well with CA. Unfortunately, the president in the U.S. now has decided that he would withdraw funding support on the U.S. side of that treaty, so Canada will still continue on. Likewise, we have Canada that has a pan-Canadian framework on climate change. We've priced carbon for all of Canada and all the provinces. That is being taken out now across the country. I was part of a small group that designed the policy potentials of mitigating climate change in agriculture and what sort of agricultural practices could be there. Carbon sequestration, CA, diverse crop rotations were all in the packages that we designed for that. Again, in the U.S. right now, they've redrawn all of their or withdrawn their policy support for climate change from local and in Paris. I guess I'm encouraged that the scientists at USDA are still doing research on climate change, carbon sequestration, and CA, so that's good. We both have reporting systems in Canada and the U.S. Canada reports every 5 years on what's happening in agriculture practices, conservation practices. We're looking now at increasing the frequency of that because the world of big data, everybody wants more and more information, so we're looking at increasing that to a 1-year frequency. The U.S. is looking at some of their statistics. They also have a conservation effects evaluation or assessment program, so they're trying to determine the $1 billion of conservation that they're supporting, what sort of effects or response are they getting from that? What's the return on their investment? Interestingly, in Canada, one of our researchers just published a paper on the ROI, or return on investment, of no-till production, both from a farm production and environment and a greenhouse gas point of view. Very high ROIs, so it's a very positive thing for us. Our new 5-year plan in Canada has public trust and climate change as priority areas. The USDA has a reinvention, I guess, or reintroduction of soil health. It was so-called soil quality in the 1990s. It's soil health now. It's getting more traction because they've created a division within USDA called soil health. So we're seeing more soil health programming going out, which is a good thing, positive thing for CA. Now, when we go below the national levels to subnational levels, we have provinces in Canada and states in the U.S. There's lots of things happening there. They're moving on it. In the U.S., there's several states all moving on cover crops, especially in the Mississippi drainage basin through the center of the U.S. Lots of initiatives on cover crops. It was precipitated mainly because of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, looking at possibility of regulating nutrients in streams. Of course, the president has cut EPA budget by 30%, so I think that will be on a slower path. It gives the advantage to the farm communities to develop the CA practices. So cover crops can either be a direct cash payment or a tax relief, a tax credit. In the case of Pennsylvania, California just announced the soil health program this month, and they're looking at ideas for that. In Canada, one of our provinces has looked at a cross-compliance with crop insurance. So if you are a CA farm, you have benefits in terms of premiums on crop insurance. Ontario also has a soil health program. And in Canada, the provinces have a principle of regional flexibility, so we don't have to apply the same agriculture policy across the whole country. We can adjust that for the specific conditions in our part of the country. Realize it's a large country and very diverse. The next level, let's say below state, is our community and farm organizations. In the 1950s, historically, they were just created to try and market their commodities, buy my wheat, buy my beef. In the 1990s, they became more focused on issues, looking at issues of erosion, type of things. And this is where we had the big influx, or the big emergence of no-till production that came into play. And we had these self-organizations of farmers occurring in both Canada and the U.S. I went through a list, estimated at least 15 different organizations in the U.S. There's probably more. Likewise in Canada, 6, and there's a few more I know there. An interesting thing, too, at that time was those organizations bringing farmers together created a certain amount of innovation thinking, and it went back to the farms, and the individual farmers are probably the most innovative. A lot of the new machinery companies and technology modifications for equipment were designed by farmers who invested their money, built businesses, innovative businesses. Subsequently, a lot of those businesses have been purchased by the larger corporate, large ag industries. Remember, those large agriculture companies are not necessarily innovative. They acquire the innovation by buying the innovation from smaller tech companies, usually started by farmers. 2010, now we're seeing more of a focus on systems-based as well as the issues, where it's almost a reduction in the activity, I suppose, of the farm organizations and an increase in the internet presence of those organizations. So internet has allowed farmers from all areas, even small communities or large communities, to get together into almost farmer tribes of interest. That can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. It's a way to bring farmers together to trade information. In the 90s, we did that pre-internet by having directories of farmers, and they could call other farmers that had similar situations to them. Now we have internet that brings us together quicker, creates more knowledge quicker. We have sustainable production type of emphasis going on. We have sustainable certifications, both developed by farm organizations and industries. Some of these farm organizations have evolved into applied research organizations, encouraging farm trials. We're seeing a lot more farm trialing going on now with CA, which is a good thing, and that information can get out quicker to everybody. The private policy developments in terms of markets and retail are also moving very quickly. Current trends in the public policy area is, in Canada, is the greenhouse gases, public trust, and water quality are big. We've developed this pan-Canadian framework. It's interestingly, the International Missions Trading Association is planning an international meeting just prior to the UN General Assembly starting in September. The Canadian greenhouse gas policy was one of the 3 major agenda items. We also have more of an interest, I guess, in ecosystem services, developing that. That's another opportunity for CA. In the U.S., it's cover crops, soil health, conservation investment, and then this new federal regime that they have to take into place. Private policy, the companies out there are developing all of that list on the right you see under private policy. It's our opportunity to link to the private policy development, because that also then in turn influences the national development. So I won't go into those lists. I could just spend minutes on each of them, but you can appreciate what's there. So we're entering this area now of what was used to be dominantly public policy. We always look to the government to set policy. We're seeing more of an influence now from the private sector developing policy, that pull from the private sector, from the retailers, wanting assurance of food, wanting assurance of production practices, supporting farmers on that. I don't think we've taken advantage of that opportunity. So we're seeing this more of a blend of the public and private policies together. So we have to, as policymakers, we have to get our head around how to do that and how to work with networks. As Pedro Vigneault said this morning or this afternoon earlier, it's about networks, the future. I agree. The right-hand graph, notice, is as we go from the large governments to the smaller farm organizations to the smaller individual farmers, innovation tends to go up. It's inverse relationship to the number of people involved. So keep that in mind, and that happens both at that first layer of government or public policy and at the second layer of the private policy. The large multinational companies to the national companies to the small corporate or small industries locally in your community, there's a lot of innovation there. We need to make sure that that innovation at the right-hand side circles back and influences both the other levels of policy. So as Gerard said, that it's not just getting the learnings there, but communicating those learnings to the policy people. That's how it makes. The policy shops don't generate these ideas or innovation by themselves. They're looking for that information from you people. The other thing to keep in mind is and when I have policy people I talk to, they say, you go to the policy books and it's a nice linear process of policy development or a nice circular process like the management cycle. They said, those are all lies, forget about them. Policy occurs in mixture. It's like an amoeba. It's what we call, or what I call, nested cycles of influence. And you can have an influence regardless of which of these spheres you're in. So we have these national spheres, the state spheres that overlap mostly with the national, but also outside of the national area. In my case, my province, we deal internationally as much as we do nationally, and I deal with other provinces. I'm dealing right now with some of we have a decade of using greenhouse gas offsets, and one of the main offset protocols was the tillage protocol for sequestering carbon. We have a decade of experience in that. Over $150 million has gone to farmers for doing no-till type practices. Now other countries are even working with California, because California is tying up with Quebec and Ontario provinces. So we're reviewing protocols, helping others move into that space. So we're having influence at different levels. So keep that in mind when you look at that right-hand side of opportunities. There's lots of opportunities there. It's your responsibility to work in those nested cycles of influence. Your home might be in one of those spheres, but you can have influence on all of those other spheres. So we are in a time of rapid change. We have lots of opportunities to take a hand of, and these opportunities can be local opportunity. They can go up. I can scale those up to international opportunities as well. So change is coming fast. Things will not stay the same, and you people are all agents of change. Marvel Comics, maybe, agents of change. So good luck, and keep in mind to get that information to the policy people. Thank you.
¿Ustedes lo ponen?
Bueno, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for invited me here. I'm not going to talk about the continent. I'm talking about a tiny country that it's Uruguay, and I want to share with you an experience that we are going through with a policy, a new policy to take care about soil quality, and that is what I'm going to share with you. Argentinos probably know this, but to other people, we are Uruguay, 14 million hectares, 1.6 million hectares of cropland, that's cereal and oil seeds, 1 million of hectares of forestry, 2,000 hectares of rice, and 11.3 million hectares of pastures and rangeland. And we have 5 cows per person in Uruguay. Yes. Okay. These are some pictures about landscape in Uruguay, things that you can see if you go around the country. What is the challenge to us? It's to produce more food. We call it sustainable intensification to minimize the environmental impact and adaptation to variability and climate change, and also to learn or how to mitigate, because we have all these international issues that we want to share with other countries, and we have a lot of policy around these things. What are the risks that we have when we want to do this? Bueno, here is a map in Uruguay. You have in the red the bigger risk of degradation in Uruguay. It's all the red, and all the other greens, it's already with crops, or almost already with crops. So we cannot increase we have to increase productivity. It is the way to produce more. So if we want to do that, the soil conservation practices and the soil conservation policy have to be done. And when we start in 2010 working and designing this new policy. We call it Soil Use and Management Plan, SMP. A little bit of history. The soil conservation law is from 1981. It's old, but till 2008, nothing was done. There was no enforcement, control. So the law was there, but nobody's doing what the law said. So there we start, and at the time the law is based only in good practices. And when you can look what is done, it's too late. You have a gully and all the land, it's in the rivers. So we thought that we have to do something to prevent the problem. The most important problem in Uruguay is water erosion. So we started with the soil management plans, and it is a law. It's you have to do it. All the farmers have to present to the ministry a soil management plan that is it is made by an agronomist. The agronomist have to take an exam, and when he's certified by the ministry, then he can present the plans to the ministry. We have around 500 agronomists that are allowed to make and present the plans. The plans has to demonstrate that the estimated annual erosion rate, we use USLA, Universal Soil Loss Equation, that it's adapted and calibrated for Uruguay during 40 years of work of research from the university and the research institute. And they have to use the model, and the erosion estimated has to be lower than a t-value for each soil. So we don't say you have to do this or that rotation with crops or with corn or soybean. The agronomists have to say what is good or better for that soil. And each soil, each land has its plan. And the agronomist is the responsible that the model is well used. This is Uruguay. All you have in pink is our cropland. We have all this in a shapefile, and we know in 2019 it's going to be there maybe a soybean or a pasture. Or we have all this information in the system because the agronomists draw in a map each one of the plots. So we have 1.5 million hectares. So that is 98% of the cropland with its plan. For example, the pastures in the rotation went from 50,000 to 200,000 because of the plants. The farmers have to introduce pastures and corn and sorghum to the rotations, and 98% of this cropland is in no-tillage system. Well, what we did, because this was difficult to the farmers, so, well, first of all, science and research. We don't say, the ministry don't say what is good for the soil or what is not good for the soil. This is science, research, university, 40, 50 years of research that says that rotation with pastures in agriculture, no tillage. So we take what science says. Then the agronomist, the private agronomist is the one who make the plan, who go to the farms, who talk with the farmer, with the companies, and he runs the model, and he's the one who say, okay, this rotation for this landscape, for this soil is okay, this one not. And the compromise of the agronomy is that he did a good job making the planification and the rotation. And then the farmers, the company, we spent 3 years working with them, talking, showing the instrument. The agronomists learned to use this model. And during 3 years, we worked with the farmers and the companies to improve year by year the tools and the way that we are going to do this. And at the 4th year, 2014, that became a law, and everybody has to do it. And our role, the ministry role was very much to coordinate, to communicate, to work with the farmers, to work with agronomists, with people in general, to explain the things, the importance of the soil quality, the soil and water conservation, because the erosion also affects water quality. And so, well, now we are going good with this, I think. And now, 2018, we are working with the dairy production. We have here in yellow a watershed or a basin that all the water, the drinkable water, comes from there. So, and there's a lot, all you see in gray is dairy farms, and all you see in green is dairy farms that today they have a sustainable dairy plan. So we are working now with dairy systems, making something pretty like we are doing in croplands, but here we are also asking the farmers if they are using fertilizante or nitrogen or phosphorus or manure. So they also have to present a fertilizer plan, because we have a lot of problems of phosphorus in the Santa Lucia basin, and we are working also with the phosphorus index and trying to minimize that the phosphorus reaches the water. Well, and we are doing all this with all these TICs or ITCs. We don't use we don't use a piece of paper in this. It's all in a web system. Our people from the ministry go to the farm with these tablets, and then they can see what is the plan there, if there is going, it have to be a pasture or it has to be a soybean, and then communicate with the minister, and well, they can, with these systems, we can do this work better. We don't have to go all around the country with a truck seeing what's happening. And this is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, moderator. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and many thanks to the organizers for inviting us. I'll be sharing some experiences related to policy from the African Conservation Agriculture Network. One is about the regional trends on the adoption of conservation agriculture. Amir has already explained a number of these aspects, but we are seeing conservation agriculture now being implemented in 20 countries in Africa, which is quite a substantial increase. We are seeing the area under CA being 2.7 million hectares. As Amir has said, is a four-fold increase in the last 10 years. But we also note that 95% of these farmers we are talking about are actually smallholder farmers cultivating 1 hectare in average. We also note that of the land under CA, 30% is by smallholders, 1% is the medium-scale farmers, and the other 69% is large-scale commercial. And only 2.5% of the cropped land is under CA. Of course, with huge variations, South Africa having the largest, close to 12% of the land being under CA. We are also having the evidence that conservation agriculture works for smallholders. And this is, of course, the work having been done in the past 15 to 20 years by different international organizations. Based on the 3 principles, as we all know, based on local practices, anchoring on the 3 principles. And sometimes the CA can be organic, in bracket, that no external inputs are used, but sometimes it can be heavy input use in that conservation agriculture. And talking about smallholder farmers, we are talking of hand tools that are very basic hand tools, the job planter, the hand whippers, to animal drawn implements like the reaper and the animal drawn seeders. We are also, of course, when you go to the large scale farmers, these can be highly sophisticated mechanized farmers. And the glaring gap was clearly mentioned. We recently had a project funded by AICIR, and I'm glad Dr. John Dixon is here, which was trying to fill that gap of this void between the smallholders and the large scale. There is nothing in between. It is a real dilemma. Very short on the organization I represent. It's a not-for-profit voluntary membership organization built with the support of different partners in John Dixon's office in Harare again in '98, FAO office. But it has had the support of so many partners to make it truly Pan-African and perform the mandate that it's entrusted upon to do. Of course, we have a secretariat in Nairobi. We have a board of directors. We have country focal institutions. And lately, we have added an international advisory panel headed by Professor Kassam. And I'm pleased to say 6 panelists are in this room, which is providing invaluable support to the board through the secretariat. The 5 strategic thrusts are as listed. Key number 6 is also about strengthening the network itself. There are numerous benefits from conservation agriculture as evidenced by research work done in Africa itself. It's not my intention to go through all of them, but just to say CA has proven to be valuable in all contexts, in all angles, from the adaptability point of view of increasing and stabilizing yields, to the case of the resiliency in terms of dry spells, to the issues of increasing benefits, to the issues of land degradation. The big question is, why aren't we getting it to every farmer in Africa to adopt and benefit from these experiences? We have documented some of the experiences, including the book from the First Africa Congress. We have benefited a lot from a lot of neighboring technologies through FAO, Embrapa. The Mill Caligari has been instrumental in bringing a lot of the Brazilian cover crops to Africa, which have been adapted, documented on their use in those farming systems. This is a short clip of a farmer who has reclaimed the land that was almost barren, making it productive again. Back to the question on why isn't every farmer in Africa adopting conservation agriculture. Some of the drivers why people go for conservation agriculture is the business drive, the profitability dimension. But as you have seen, only 5% of the farmers are large scale. We are talking of 95% of the farmers being small scale. And the business people do not see a market in smallholder farmers. They see problems of how to mobilize those farmers, how to get a meaningful market of inputs and services. So the fragmentation, the low demands are real challenges when you are targeting smallholders, unlike the large-scale farmers who can they are attractive to the business sector, and the economies of scale both ways. It makes it attractive to the private sector investors, but also to the farmers themselves. We have seen that with the conservation agriculture, because of increased resilience, there is assurance of having a crop in trying moments. And this is for all, it's not only for large-scale or smallholders. But we have seen the effect of policy incentives, which works for all. We have seen the effect of mainstreaming conservation agriculture in knowledge and skills systems, whereby people who are knowledgeable can truly practice and implement conservation agriculture properly and benefit from it. So a few of the policy interventions that we have seen working. One is to influence government policy development. And 2 examples I can mention is from the Third World Congress, which ACT and partners held in 2005 in Nairobi. We found one of the ministers who participated for the whole week. When he went back to Zambia, he took the lessons he had learned from this event. And no wonder Zambia is one of the countries leading in smallholder conservation agriculture to date. But we have also seen the case of the first Africa Congress on conservation agriculture, which came up with a vision 25 by 25, having 25 million smallholder farmers in Africa adopting conservation agriculture, which was fortunately endorsed by the African Union. And we are seeing now national governments, it's cascading down to national governments. They are developing frameworks, they are developing programs based on this declaration. And we already have seen national governments setting aside funds within countries, through the agricultural sector development programs, aligned to the Malabo Declaration, and they are leveraging funds to get conservation agriculture implemented in their own countries. We have seen from this Malabo Declaration events, ACT held events together in partnership with the FAO and the World Bank to get sustainable mechanization strategy for Africa. As you all know, Africa wants to send the hoe to the museum by 2025, so it's imperative to have alternative technologies to the hand hoe. With the NORAD and national governments, we are developing the conservation agriculture centers of excellency, which are basically research and training institutions through curricula and e-learning to systemically build the capacity of future extension workers, to build the capacity of the academia so that these can take conservation agriculture into the research agenda, into the training agenda. And we are working now with the formation of mechanized conservation agriculture service provider associations. Hopefully, the need for business models that are attractive to the smallholder farmers can be included. Tom was talking on the increase of private sector participation with time. I fully agree with that notion. It's the trend which is taking place. We only need to see what business models are appropriate for these communities so that smallholder farmers can access services rather than thinking they must buy their own equipment, their own machineries to make to have conservation agriculture services. So in this same context, ACT and partners are organizing the second Africa Congress in Johannesburg next year. So this is an invitation and information to you all. Again, we expect to have a policy platform to influence the ministers who are going to participate so that we are able to realize implementation of this Malabo Declaration, which is an African Union declaration. And finally, to say, ACT is also evolving from a capacity building partner on CA to a regional institution working with the regional partners. The side event to follow this evening will be between ACT and the European Conservation Agriculture Federation in the context of building alliances, of building synergies for us to be able to influence policy. Thank you for listening.
We thank you to all the speakers for very interesting contributions. We haven't got much time left. In fact, we've run out of time. But I would like to suggest that we do allow a few questions. And if we have questions, please direct them to particular panel members. So the floor is open for... Do we
Thank you so much. What is the big message we take from the panel? What is the key learning and what we can take from here? I think it will be good if we can have something on that.
Very good question, ML, and I would like.
I have a mic here.
What are the key learnings which you would like to mention? Not everybody, but would you like to say something? Okay.
I think the important message is that we need to promote conservation agriculture in different parts of the world by learning lessons from where there had been successes already. And to do this conservation agriculture, you need to really work with farmers and try to refine and also ensure adoption of innovations that are critical for scaling innovation, which is needed in the present context. And we require policy advocacy, without which it would possibly not be able to take off on a larger scale. And we need also public awareness, particularly to ensure the people that conservation agriculture is for sustainable development and also to meet sustainable development goals.
ML, was your question directed to the Indian situation? No, generally? Okay. One more, if I may suggest. Tom, would you like to respond?
Okay. I think when I think through all the presentations here, there's a lot of good things happening at the farm and the farm organization level. And I think that needs to be communicated to the policy people. Don't wait for the policy people to train themselves. They're not very good at that. So you have to take that information and present it to the policies people. And remember, it's different points of contact. You can contact the national, you can contact your state, local, municipalities, all of those players, and connect to the private sector as well. Important to do. I just did another job I had. I did a research review of research structures in agriculture and government globally in one of the European countries. For researchers that got money to do their research, they were not allowed to sign off as a completed project until they had developed a simple policy interpretation of their research for the policy people. So, things like that maybe need to be done.
Just a small one, a little bit of the same, but policymakers or people who work in policy, we don't have to work or to do things against farmers, we have to do it with. Our experience of 3 years building this soil management plan is that we have to work with the farmers, with them, knowing about them, and farmers just don't like to not take care of the soil. We are all in the same need, so that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Would anybody in the audience like to make a comment on this point? Yes, could you?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, we are actually stepping up the entire CA discussion. In the past, it was always a point, does it work? Is it economically feasible? Does it make sense? Where can it be applied? And I think that is not a point anymore. In all your presentations, it came through. It is feasible, it's economic. In the opening, we heard it. But it's now the point that even where we could prove that it worked, it didn't necessarily pick up. And that's where the linkage farmers policy come in, where the policies do take a role. And, well, I come from Cuba. We have just developed now a policy in Cuba because we found that the field pilot experiments, which were very successful, did not lead to an automatic spread in the country. So we need the policy to support to really get into a development mode. And I think that is a big message of this forum, the linkage of practice to policies, and, as we heard from the opening, to scale it up to the SDG discussion. We still have a long way to go to bring the issue to the awareness, to the general awareness of the policymakers, and playing the big game in the world on the development agenda, because on that agenda it's still, the term is still not really present.
Thank you, Theo. I'll take one more question on a different subject. Sorry, Jagdish. Is that you? Yep, okay.
Maybe it's for you, Amir. You mentioned about 180 million hectares under CA. Are we following the definition of CA strictly when you have this 180 million hectares, those three pillars?
Yes, this is where we try and meet the minimum. So this is where we feel, and again, Jagdish, you know, this is not it's a black and white thing. You know, when you look at the conventional agriculture, you get just bloody all basket of rubbish going around there, and nobody says anything about it. But these figures essentially are respecting minimum criteria, which we have stated. So while we have CA in a sense described, we also have quantitative criteria, which we try to apply for our database development. So these things would, and they're basically on a different track. These farmers are actually no longer practicing conventional agriculture. They are on a different track, and they're just getting better and better and better, knowing that this is time-related, biology-related transition. And you have a whole host of variation within that, but they all are meeting, as far as we can tell. As I said, the leading edge of no-till is further out there. And we think there's another 20 million already coming into the CA process, and we're starting with CA. It's like Russia, and we're very careful. Like Russia claims that they've got 12.5 million hectares of no-till, but we've only accepted 4.2 million hectares as meeting minimum CA standard. Same thing with Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, they claim that there's a lot of area under minimum disturbance, but Aziz will say, but so far, much small area is under CA. So those things we try and include in the final estimate. Okay, one more question on substance. Yeah, please. Yes. Oh, these lights are blinding, you know.
Thank you, Amir. Actually, I have a question. How this forum can be influential to the government of different countries to adopt the CA. Particularly, I can give some example in case of India. The rotavator has given some subsidy. The rotavator having like the 50% subsidy for pulverizing the soil. But the price of the rotavator is about half of a heavy seeder. So also heavy seeder can get the similar percentage of subsidy. So whether this forum can be influential to change the subsidy system in favor of the CA system. So can you please explain how this forum can be influential to the government related to the CA system? Thank you.
Would you like Dr. Paroda to answer that, or would you like Harminder to answer that?
ML, you can reply.
ML, yeah, ML, yes. Yeah. Could you? I know, but you will.
I think it's, I mean, you cited one example, a concrete example, how the counterproductive policies are, taking the CA movement back. And this is one of the examples. It's not only the India, but it's reaching Bangladesh, Nepal, everywhere. But I think there's a realization, and that's what is coming out of the group, how to learn from the successes or the failures. And in that context, for example, it was started in Northwest IGP, the rotavator. In 4 or 5 years, the farmers have realized this is not good for the soil. And more particularly when you have the climatic events where the risks are there. For example, a couple of years back, we had heavy rains continuously at the maturity, of the wheat, and which was impacted, severely the wheat productivity. And people have realized, even the policymakers realized, and we try to influence the policy and show them the evidence. I think there is a realization. So the government of Haryana and Punjab, they have brought down the subsidies of the rotavator already. And when Dr. Paroda was chairing the Farmer Commission in Haryana, and there is a notification by the government that all the subsidy of the rotavator will be diverted to the no-till machine, the happy seeder. So things are there, but I think we have to make a strong case with those successes and failures. So, yeah, and that's required.
Thank you. I think I would like to bring the discussion to a close, but if you really want to go on, one more question, because I've seen more hands. We're going to be here because there's another meeting already now. We're running into the next meeting time. So I think, all right, you seem to be very insistent. Go on, what is your question? Sir, can you
Well, please, the last one.
Just be ready to take it.
Hi, I'm Davidson.
You are from Embrapa?
From Embrapa, okay. Brazil. I'd like to ask for Ms. Hill. I'm quite impressed with the Uruguayan case, because you put in practice what I consider the primary objective, seeing the research results serving as basis for public policies. About the fact that each farm has a technical supervisor, how many farms each agronomist can follow? Is there any capacity building program to pass away this approach to them? How it works to avoid conflicts of interest with private sector? Thank you.
Did you understand the question? Did you? Yeah, please try and
I think I understand like 50% of the question, but let's start. The ministry, we have a direction of rural development, and for all the application of the policies to smallholders, we have support to them to do the plans, to hire the agronomists. We have like different policies to different farmers. For example, big or middle companies, they have to do it themselves, and we have support for smallholders so they can do the things that they have to do for the policy. This is one of your questions, right? The other one. Oh, yes. Private sector. Oh, yes. It was very hard at the beginning because all the private sector, at the beginning, the private sector said, no, I can do with my land whatever I want to. But in the law in Uruguay, the soil is like a public good. So the law allows the government to make to restrict the use of the land, of the soils, because it's a public good. So at the first, we have a lot of problems with the sector, but then we work with like people from Aapresid, it's like Aapresid, but there, and owners that were concerned about soil quality, and so we start working with them, with the private sector, and then like 3 years later, bueno, and it's a law, they have to do it, and it's sanction, like they have to pay if they don't do it. So at the end of the day, they have to, they have no choice. But we built all the process with them, so it was a good thing. Later, today, they're all agree with the policy. I think.
Dr. Paroda has a comment, and then we will close the meeting. Yeah.
I think one point is very important, that there is a paradigm shift now from unipillar approach for increasing productivity. Now there is definite realization of going for sustainable production through good agronomic practices. And for that, any innovation for natural resource management, if we think about for scaling out for an impact on farmers' livelihood, then it is conservation agriculture.
Okay, I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thanks very much for your active participation. And the panel, thank you very much for your contributions. And we have a meeting, and I was just wondering whether we could continue the meeting here. Can we? Just hang on. There's a meeting on Africa-Europe relationship. And,
yes, from now to 7:45 p.m.
We can? Oh,
yes.
Wonderful. So we would like to recommend that you participate in this next meeting, and that would be about an hour, 1 hour meeting.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.